Hello and welcome to Elementor's webinar on the topic of Google's Core Web Vitals update. I'm Ben Pines and I'd like to introduce Barry Schwartz, editor at Search Engine Land, Patrick Stox, technical SEO at Ahrefs, and Kristina Azarenko, SEO and consultant at MarketingSyrup, and our very own Guelmann, SEO team leader at Elementor. Thanks everyone for being here. So, guys, first I'd like to let you introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Barry Schwartz. I'm based in New York. I am pretty well known in the search SEO world for writing a lot about the changes that happen with Google and Google search and SEO. I've been doing that for almost 20 years now. So that's a little bit about me.
And Patrick?
Hey, I'm Patrick Stox. I'm from Raleigh, North Carolina. I work at Ahrefs and I'm pretty well known, but mainly by technical SEOs.
Cool. Kristina?
Hey everyone, I'm Kristina Azarenko. I'm based in Toronto, Canada, but currently I'm basically in the middle of nowhere. I'm a technical and e-commerce SEO consultant. I have helped mostly e-commerce websites with technical stuff and patients, and I also teach people, real students with my courses, how to do this properly.
Welcome everyone, and Andre, I'll let you also introduce yourself.
I'm Guelmann. I'm the SEO team leader here at Elementor. I've been working for more than 10 years now with SEO, mainly with small startups and SaaS companies.
So thanks guys. So let's dive right into it. Core Web Vitals update, it's actually being postponed, but it is happening. So who wants to tell us a bit what it is?
I can. So it's called the Google Page Experience Update. And the Page Experience Update was announced about a year ago, I think last May, that it's going to basically incorporate a bunch of different signals to encourage webmasters and site owners to make their pages better for users and a better experience for users, hence the name Page Experience Update. The Page Experience Update incorporates a bunch of signals. Those signals include what Google calls the Core Web Vitals, as well as other signals. The Core Web Vitals are around signals called LCP, largest contentful paint, first input delay. Those are two kind of speed-related factors, as well as something called cumulative layout shift, CLS, which is about if a page is jumpy when you go to it, like if you go to a page and it loads and you try to click on something and then it jumps and you click on something else, that's kind of annoying. So those are the three Core Web Vitals that are incorporated in this Page Experience Update. In addition, also includes old signals that Google is incorporating into this update, which is mobile friendliness. Is it safe browsing to browse the website? Is it over HTTPS? And are there intrusive interstitial ads that are kind of annoying in your way? So that is what this Google Page Experience Update is about. Like you said, it's postponed. It was supposed to launch in May or so, but now it's not launching until mid-June, and then it's going to take a slow rollout to happen from mid-June until the end of August in terms of this rollout.
So I want to delve into each of those recommendations, but before, every time a Google change is happening, there's bound to be panic, like Panda and Penguin. Like, do you guys think that the panic is justified?
I don't think it is. Page speed's been a ranking factor for a while now. I don't see them ramping it up, but at least initially, where it's going to impact more sites than they really already are with the updates.
Other opinions, guys? Do you agree, Andre?
I agree. I think, like Barry put, it's another factor in this Page Experience Update, and we saw both the same panic when some of the other ones, like the mobile friendliness and HTTPS, when they were announced. And we saw that in those cases, same thing happened. It was a slow rollout. I mean, some of them, I think mobile friendly, it's still kind of happening. So it means it's something important, but the idea is that for people to start thinking about this now, start paying attention. It's not that things will change overnight, definitely not in terms of SEO.
So there are three parts. Let's expand on that a bit. So the first part is called CLS, right? Barry?
Yeah, I mean, there's no first or second part. They're all parts. Cumulative layout shift, CLS is one of them. And I kind of like this one. The CLS is about, does the page jump around when you're trying to interact with it? And there's nothing more annoying when you're trying to click on a button and you're about to click on it, and then you click, and then you click on something else, and then you're taken to somewhere you don't want to go. So I'm glad Google actually is incorporating this factor.
And it's interesting because it's the one that actually demonstrates that it's about page experience and not performance, right? Because it has nothing to do with how fast a page loads. This is what's interesting about this metric.
Exactly, it's a pure experience metric. It doesn't look at how fast things are, and measuring speed is almost impossible. Every single tool you use out there in terms of measuring speed shows you a different score. So that's why kind of Google added more factors into this.
And this is something that has been already done. Like you should have already optimized for it. Kristina, have you optimized this in the past? For the
yes
CLS?
and no. So I get it. So I'd say that overall, you can see CLS pretty much on like news websites when everything is jumping. But there is also a different part of this when things don't visually look very bad. For example, when you download one font, but then a different font loaded, like font flickering happens. Or when some parts, some images jump a little bit, it doesn't interfere with user experience a lot, but now it's counted as well. So basically, I help my clients to optimize for, huge layout shifts, but before CLS became a real thing, right? Nobody looked at fonts. I wouldn't say nobody, not everybody looked at fonts and some minor elements. So now this is a thing as well, and now we are optimizing for this. And yeah, that's great. That's great that Google started to incorporate it as part of its page experience, because honestly, on many websites, it was really, really annoying.
Yeah. Let's move on to the next one, FID. Patrick, what exactly does it mean? This does have to do with performance.
Yeah, it's the FID basically has to do with nothing but pure JavaScript. All of JavaScript runs on the main thread. In theory, they're service workers, so it gets a little more complicated, but they compete for resources with each other. And so FID is trying to say, like, when can I respond? When is there a pause in that thread that I can respond to a user input? So I click something and nothing happens. That's because the main thread is very busy and it has to finish up whatever it's running, whatever task is running, and then it can respond to whatever you click, whatever you tried to expand or go to another page, that kind of thing.
Also for scrolling and those delays, right?
No, scrolling's not accounted for.
Oh. What about the last one, LCP, Barry?
Yeah, so that's another metric. It's a user-centric metric for measuring perceived load page speed. It basically marks the point in the page load time when the page's main content has likely loaded. So you want to make sure, it's basically a way for Google to say, all right, we know this page has fully loaded and this is how long it took. It's one of the main metrics people use or tools use to figure out if a page is fully loaded or partially loaded on some level. This way they know how fast a page takes to load for a user.
So what is the reason that Google has decided on these three metrics? Yeah, Patrick.
I would say, because visually loaded, I wouldn't say it's fully loaded. Like fully loaded is like everything loaded, but it's what users perceive as loaded. If they can see the page, they think it's loaded. So that's a good measure. Do things move around, with CLS? That's another good measure. Or things like shifting, or are they stable? And basically, does it respond when I wanted to do something? Those are all really good measures. there might be more in the future that they decide to incorporate into Core Web Vitals, but I think that gives an overall, like, is this loaded? Is it stable? And is it usable?
So do you agree if all these three are perfect? Does this mean my site offers a good web experience?
No, I don't think any of them are really perfect measures. If I had to say, like, there's a lot of different metrics for visual load alone. FCP, I think CP in this case, sorry, it used to be FCP. LCP is pretty good because it's mostly visually loaded, but they may decide to change that and be like, this is fully visually loaded now. FID, you know, it's when users do something, and generally, like, at the start of a page load, there's going to be a lot more JavaScript running, but not necessarily people clicking then. So there was, in the lab test, they actually have another, or they used to have max potential first input delay, which was like basically the longest it would take to respond to an input at any time. So ideal conditions, someone clicks at the worst possible time. That's kind of what that measured. FID is very messy in that you don't know when people are clicking. It might be they are on the page 3 minutes before they click something, in which case everything's probably loaded, nothing's really running, and it can respond fast.
So the problem is you don't get like real-time response, and you don't know which browser they're using. So how do you, yeah, Barry?
We know what I mean, this is all coming from, or most of it's coming from the Chrome user experience report, which is obviously pulled from Chrome. So it's called Crux data. And the data itself is also somewhat lagged because Google said there's a 28-day period for Google to collect this data. So even if you update your page today, what Google is using today is not going to be what a user sees today. It might be a 30-day delay or so from when Google actually incorporates that data into your rankings or your Core Web Vitals reports. So like Patrick was saying and Kristina was saying, it's basically one of many metrics that developers use to make sure their pages are performing well for users. And Google just selected these three because they can select everything in the world that's out there. And then what they did was they doubled down and they went ahead and made sure that people have the necessary reports to kind of debug those pages to make them perform well. But Google themselves even downplayed, like we discussed before, the importance of this update. Google themselves said this is not going to be a drastic update. Do not freak out. It will be okay. Your rankings are not going to drop significantly if you don't do anything. But you should do something because this doesn't hurt to do something, and it gives your developers something to do because they have nothing to do all day anyway.
Yeah, that's great. And I think one thing both you, Barry, and Patrick mentioned, why Core Web Vitals? Because Google have a bigger list that's called Web Vitals, right? Which includes many more metrics, like Patrick mentioned, first contentful page and time to first byte. And they saw how complex this is. And the idea was, okay, let's select a number of a few specific metrics that most website owners will be able to affect. And then we know, okay, if you work on this and you optimize this, most situations it means your website will provide a good user experience. But like Patrick said, it's actually, Google are saying pay attention to this, but there are other things that you can pay attention to. And like Barry said, it's either way, it's not something that you should worry about in terms of SEO. You should think about improving your website because, it provides a better user experience for your user. It helps with conversion. But on the SEO ranking aspect, it's not something to worry about.
I think Google's intention is good here regarding improving web experience. Do you see, Patrick, you monitor, your company monitors millions of sites. Do you see a problem in sites in general regarding performance and user experience?
That depends on how you measure it, I guess. It's complicated. Sites are big and overly complex now, more so than they should be, simply because things get bundled together and lots of additional tracking is used by websites. And it's just, it could be a lot more simple, and I think that's where Google wants to push people, is to try and get things a little more simplified than it is, just because I think it has spiraled out of control a bit in the last decade or so.
Yeah, for sure. Kristina, you optimize for your clients, and do you see like there's a problem of the difference between mobile and desktop? How do you usually go about addressing this?
So I always look only at the mobile metrics because of mobile first indexing, which basically means that Google only looks at the mobile version of your pages. So and also if mobile experience is good, then most likely the desktop experience is going to be good as well, because it's measured on in different ways. So I always look at the mobile versions, and honestly, to Patrick's point, now the websites are so complicated, and tracking codes, which are JavaScript codes, an average e-commerce website would have, I don't know, 10 different codes, and they all need it. They need all of these codes, and you can't just ignore this. You can't just delete all these JavaScript files to improve page speed, because your page speed would be great, but then you're not remarketing to your users and all this stuff. So I think it's a little bit hard to reach all of the green numbers in Core Web Vitals. Yes, and it's a challenge, but we are all working on this. And at the end of the day, as Barry and Patrick said, this is not going to have a really huge impact on the rankings overall. And I also think that page speed in general has been around for a long time, but it was quite hard to justify development resources for this from clients, right? But when something becomes a ranking factor, it's getting so much easier to justify those resources. So now clients are more eager to do this, so this is good. But at the end of the day, it's not realistic that everybody, all the websites will pass Core Web Vitals, to be honest.
Yeah, it's like feeling is that Google dangling the carrot in front of it, right? Like, okay, here's right. The incentive for you to go ahead and do this, even if for us we know that the impact won't be that big. At least like I said, it helps getting buy-in from developers and stakeholders to make these changes that do improve the website too.
So you would think that.
Yeah.
And we saw that with the HTTPS update when Google said, make your site HTTPS. A lot of sites migrated very quickly to HTTPS. But search metrics study just came out recently. And it showed that of the 2,000 URLs they crawled, 2 million URLs they just crawled, only 4% of those URLs achieved a good score across all the Core Web Vital metrics, the 3 Core Web Vital, LCP, FID, and cumulative layout shifts. So it's very interesting to see that most sites are, I mean, at least, I don't know, 2 million URLs is a big sample study, but it seems like they're not ready yet, which is kind of concerning, and maybe that's why Google kind of postponed it. I'm not exactly sure. But that's an interesting metric.
If you had to kind of say how it's going to develop, how would you say which sites are going to be affected? In August when it fully comes out?
None.
Well, that's good news. When we're talking about optimization, there's usually the more advanced stuff that you need a developer like JavaScript and everything, but there's always also some quick wins. Can you share quick wins that site owners can make to improve their performance and vitals?
Well, I can share a few. So I think the biggest ones are resizing the images, because I've seen it so many times when people would just upload a huge image and they actually need just part of it, or they're using it 10x smaller. So this is one of the things to think about, just resizing images, compressing them, maybe moving to WebP formats, and also reviewing JavaScript files and reviewing tracking codes. What I mean by that is I find it very often when a website is using many tracking codes that they no longer needed because there was some marketing person that used to work 3 years ago. They installed something and it was never deleted from the website. So this is something that I would look into 100%. And one more thing is be careful embedding content from other websites, like for example, from Twitter, from Instagram. I did a quick experiment with a Twitter embed, and just one Twitter embed on a page influenced the page performance really badly. So if you can change the embed to just a screenshot of this tweet and linking to the tweet, that would be enough. And this is a small change, but it will aggregately, it will be really huge influence on the website performance.
And I think at the same time, I run the same test and it's exactly this. It's very dramatic. We can see embedding Twitter and Instagram. But I would say, Liz, at the same time, if that's something that, important, it's an important element on your page, you shouldn't remove, because like I said, page experience, maybe this is important content that belongs there. I think, if an empty page, it's super fast and it passes the core web vitals.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's not really, so you need to measure the page experience with this. How much you remove and how much you leave, because your website.
Yeah, that's why.
Yeah, it has a purpose. Every website, every page has a purpose, and it needs to get to this point. What you want people to do. So it's not just remove everything.
Kristina, you wanted to add?
Yeah, exactly. That's why that I would not recommend just removing the content. You can change it. Instead of an embed, you can have a screenshot of this, for example, post. If this content, for example, tweet embed, I didn't remove the tweet, the overall Twitter from my page. I just exchanged it to screenshot versus an embed, and it made a huge difference. And And also one of the last things that I'm going to say about this is look at the performance of all the pages, because Google looks at your whole website. If, for example, you have 50 pages, but you care about only 10 of them and you optimize them, that's cool. But what about other 40 pages? They might not be something that you consider as ranking pages, like, for example, privacy policy or contact or something like that. But Google looks at all of the pages of the web. You need to think about each of them, even those that are no indexed.
I want to add a couple little tips and tricks here also. I think most of the measures currently really are about like initial page experience. I have a feeling probably next year they'll add something about like total load size and total size of the page and all, because a lot of the current metrics you can fix by basically moving things around and prioritizing the load of certain things over others. So like JavaScript, you can, kind of stop the blocking with async or defer attributes on the scripts. A lot of the, images or fonts or basically anything needed above the fold for that largest contentful paint, you want earlier in the process, and you can kind of rearrange how that stuff is done by using like preload or inlining some of the things. And it's just shifting things around really. And maybe Google's just using us for training data, and they'll do all this in Chrome for us in the future, I hope, because it really can be complex. But I think the big miss from them in this update is you don't really have to change your page size to really meet any of these metrics.
Yeah, you can pass the core web vitals and still have a page that loads in 30 seconds, right? If you know what you're doing.
Yeah. You mentioned before the balance, Andre, the balance between design and performance. How do you see this balance? And
I think it's what we were just talking with Kristina. This, especially for our users that are web creators, is don't go ahead, removing content. First, like Kristina said, think about what you can replace and still provide the same user experience. And even more than that, like I said, we know that is not going to have a big impact in rankings on SEO. So think about the user experience on conversion, what you can do to improve there. But and also I think something that we haven't spoke yet is that when we are thinking about scores, Web Vitals and with the page speed score, Google gives us a generic number, but we also need to understand that they're measuring this regards to our competition also, right? Meaning in some industries, it's very common to have websites that are, slow, we can call like this. Huge e-commerce, like Kristina mentioned, or websites that are very visual. Means probably you and all your competitors will have websites that load slowly or have a poor score. So when thinking about my score is too low, my website's too slow, you need to compare with your competitors, with your industry. You're competing with them, right? That's what's important.
What about, we were here in Elementor, so how do you, SEO experts, see users using website builders solutions in terms of performance and in terms of web experience? Barry, I'll let you answer.
So using third-party platforms for web experience, you're asking?
Just using website builders and
Right. So I suspect a lot of these website builders are already, if not, they're in the process of making sure their templates and systems are go for this. I mean, like Kristina and Patrick were saying, if you're thinking about this not from like a technical perspective, it's like when you bake food, what could you substitute with vegetable oil for canola oil, or I don't even know if this makes any sense, but you're substituting the ingredients of the website to make it healthier for the person consuming that website. So I assume all these platforms have already done a lot of this stuff. I know WordPress has done things. I know there's different plugins for different applications out there. And for them, it's somewhat easier for them to make these changes because it affects so many more sites out there. So I suspect that a lot of these platforms have already done a lot of these changes or are in the process of doing so. And if not, there's a lot of plugin developers out there that are building these plugins that kind of help with that. Of course, on a page-by-page basis, you might have something on the page they just can't adapt. Just like when Google came out with AMP, a lot of plugins came out to build AMP, and then it built the wrong type of AMP pages. So you just got to be careful when you're implementing this stuff. But I assume a lot of these platforms are already handling this or handling it very soon.
At least what we did is definitely make a lot of changes to continue and improve performance even more. But we also created a course because we found that a lot of impact you can do by teaching people how to optimize their site while they're using their website builder. So shameless plug to everyone who's listening to watch the course. I wanted to ask, what are you guys doing to prepare your own sites for Core Web Vitals and for performance?
I guess I'll start. So I'm not personally doing much. Usually I'm like the first to like try something. So when HTTPS came out, everybody was like nervous about migrating to HTTPS. I'm like, I'm gonna jump in and try it and see what happens and then tell everybody how it went. With this, I kind of want to see the opposite. What happens if you don't do anything? So I want to be like, I did nothing and this is what happened to me, that type of thing. But obviously there's other sites that we're doing stuff with, like my corporate site. We're updating it. The thing is, it's kind of like you make the changes, you get that green score, and then a month later, Google does some type of update to how they measure this stuff, and then it goes back to red. So, so it's always fun. But obviously, like I said, it keeps your developers busy.
Do you see in your industry like over optimization or over focus on these changes, Patrick?
Yeah, there's a lot of people very focused. It happens every year. Google comes out with some announcement for something, and that's the focus for several months. And it's usually blown out of proportion. You're not going to get a ton out of it in a lot of cases, but it's the newest, hottest thing, and I think people tend to gravitate towards that.
Andre, do you want?
I think especially the part we're talking about technical SEO, because it's something, right, you can do and measure right away. Especially in this case, you have a score that I can affect. SEO, it's so complex, and you have to do a lot of things that it's hard to measure and takes time. Now, suddenly there's something, it's a score, it's a number. I can do, I can affect, and I can control. I think this is part of people are putting much more focus on this that they probably should, because it makes you feel, okay, I'm in control of something, and yeah, you are. But truth, SEO is about prioritizing always. I think it doesn't matter if you're freelancer work with clients, if you work in an agency, or if you're an in-house SEO, you always have limited resources, and it's about prioritizing. And the truth is, for most people, most websites by far, can probably give you like a list of 10, 20, 30 other factors that you should be worrying about in terms of SEO than this. Right
Kristina,
now.
how do you prioritize the task you get a new client?
It depends. Who would have thought? Because it depends on the client and it depends on the overall stage they are on right now. So, for example, if I work with some content management systems and I create all the processes for them that they will use on all the websites that they empower, and in that situation, it makes sense to start working on page speed experience right now, because it will take time for them to implement it, to integrate in the platform, and then roll out for all the websites that they empower, right? So in that situation, yes, we already working on this. And with some other websites, honestly, they've had really bad speed scores. And it's not about rushing for the update, it's e-commerce. Page speed matters in e-commerce. So that's why we are optimizing it, not necessarily because Google is rolling out the update, but because we want to make sure that the page experience is good enough for people to convert. And I believe that this is the most important thing. It's not like you need to do something for Core Web Vitals which doesn't help with anything else. These things like caching, like loading the page faster and making it more stable helps with conversions as well. So that's where I'm coming from. And if I see that it's justified right now, or it can be added to the priority or to the roadmap in general pretty soon, I'm doing it. If no, if there are some crawlability issues or JavaScript issues, definitely they are of high priority than page speed experience.
And in terms of performance in general, like when is a time that you would say is a good time to involve a developer, Barry?
This is a developer thing. So if your plans are to work on Core Web Vitals, you will need a developer to work on this for you. So you need to incorporate a developer right away if this is something you want to tackle.
Is there a change between if it's a small site or a large site?
I don't think so. I mean, these are more technical changes for the most part. These really aren't SEO changes. They're more developer-oriented changes. Maybe somebody would call it technical SEO, but they're more of a developer thing than big or small site. It could be a one-page site and you have no idea how to update it. If you don't know how to code, then you need somebody who knows how to code, and you need a coder to do it for you.
Yeah. Speaking of SEO, like where do you see Google going more and more into web experience and these sort of matters in terms of SEO and like ranking, Patrick?
Probably. I mean, it makes sense for them to look at they want to serve users a good experience. So yes, but it's one of those things where they're probably feeling it out and trying to see like how much relevance they can add. Because I think the number one thing they're looking at is simply like content and relevance of the page. Like is the information there, is whatever the users need there. And then kind of secondary factors, these page experience factors.
Before I close, guys, do you want to add something else? And please tell us how people can reach you also.
All right, so I'm Barry Schwartz, and if you need to reach out to me about anything related to SEO questions, I don't really sell SEO services, but feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. I'm super active on Twitter. My handle is @RustyBrick, RustyBrick, and I share a lot of SEO stuff on there.
Patrick?
I'm @PatrickStox, just like my name on Twitter. That's probably the easiest way to get me.
Kristina?
I'm Kristina Azarenko, and if you want to ask me questions about something about SEO on Twitter, I'm really active there, and you can find me at Azarchik, Twitter, and CK at the end. Or if you can just Google me, Kristina Azarenko, and you'll pretty easily find me. there as well.
Cool. Huge thanks to Barry, Patrick, and Kristina, and Andrea, of course, for participating in our Core Web Vitals Update webinar. And thanks for everyone watching. If you want to learn more about website performance, check out the resources in the description and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks everyone, thanks Andre. Until next time, this is Ben from Elementor.